Formula One is about athletes. 26 drivers from diverse backgrounds who share a dream of becoming world champion. It's about fans, millions of them across the globe. Most of all, Formula One is about racing. A contest of speed and daring. Finding the limits of a driver's ability. Testing the powers of the world's most exotic racing cars, and sometimes going beyond the edge. It's a drama played out on the world's most glittering stages. It's about teams performing together. And one driver working alone, perfecting the skill of controlling a car at speed. It's about the quest to be the fastest, the bravest, the best. To win, to claim the glory and the bounty. To live the life of a rock star or a movie idol. To be the Formula One World Driving Champion. Mexico City looked like chaos at the start. But at the end, it was a repeat of the opening race at South Africa. Nigel Mansell winning. On the podium, his teammate Riccardo Patrese beside him, and for the first time in his career, young Michael Schumacher there as well. South Africa marked the opening round of the 16-race Odyssey, touching 5 continents in quest of the World Championship. In the course of the journey, the contenders will race over 3,200 miles, travel nearly 100,000 miles, spend more than $500 million, and they'll be watched by more than 2 billion people. ESPN, the world leader in motorsports coverage, presents Speed World. It is round 3 of the Formula One World Championship, the Brazilian Grand Prix. You know, this is the nation that has fathered 3 men who went on to win Formula One titles, a total of 8 between them. Today's race is here at the Interlagos circuit, officially called the Autodromo Jose Carlos Pache. It's right in the city of Sao Paulo, which is along the southern coast of Brazil. Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Brule. You know, last year it was Ayrton Senna who finally won his hometown Grand Prix, but it doesn't seem very likely today. That's because of Nigel Mansell. You know, in Mexico, he was the Conquistador. If he gets any better, he might as well be called the Terminator. You know, Mansell has dominated the first 2 races of the year, and he's made it clear he thinks there's still a lot more in the car. He now has 23 wins. He's tied with Nelson Piquet for 7th on the all-time list, and he has 20 pole positions. Now, so far, Riccardo Patrese has played the role of backup perfectly, finishing second to Nigel in each race, but you have to think that he has hopes of doing more. Should Mansell falter, Patrese is ready to step in and make a run at the championship. Now, who's the best of the rest? Well, Michael Schumacher has lived up to all of Benetton's hopes. So far, he's done a wonderful job. Now, it may take a Williams disaster to get him atop the podium, but he's definitely ready to step in. Also ready to step in is our regular Formula One analyst, David Hobbs. And the other story this weekend you have to talk about is Ayrton Senna.
Well, Mansell and Patrese are certainly the dynamic duo, but Senna and Berger are the ex-dynamic duo, and I don't suspect they want to be ex that much longer. In fact, of course, at the moment it's Berger and Senna. They're languishing in 4th and 5th spots in the championship, and Senna's an emotional man and is going to want to do well in front of his home crowd. Yesterday afternoon, they qualified on the 2nd row, but this morning in warm-up, they were in 9th and 16th spot, which I fear is more indicative of where they're going to be in this afternoon's race. Senna himself, in front of a home crowd, also on his home track, a track that he helped redesign just 4 years ago. And it's a tricky little track, 14 turns, 2.6 miles, and quite a bit of elevation change. They're going to cross the start-finish line at about 195 miles an hour, and going into turn 1, I think, is where we'll see most of the overtaking action this afternoon. Turns 1, 2, and 3 are the Senna S's. The track then unwinds, the cars get up into 6th speed and go down into turn 4. This is another place where you're going to see some attempts at overtaking. It's a much faster left-hander, not quite so easy to overtake. Turns 5, 6, and 7 And then we come up to turn Bico de Pato. Now, this is where yesterday afternoon, Nigel Mansell and Senna had one of their little altercations, which they've had over the years. It's the slowest corner on the track, a very sharp right-hand first or second gear corner. The track then goes steeply downhill around a long left-hander, and a multiple bunch of left-hand curves leads them back onto the start-finish line and up to about 195 miles an hour again.
A quick tour of the Brazilian track here at Interlagos. Now, and out on the pits today, Andrew Marriott will be along pit row. He has been very busy down along the McLaren side today.
Here in the McLaren garage, there's actually 82 people working, and there's 6 race cars. 3 of the old ones, they're not using those, and 3 of the brand new MP4/7 cars. This is the new McLaren, which is meant to put Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger back at the front of the grid. They're interesting, exciting cars, although actually they don't look too much different to the old MP4/6. What's new about the cars? They've got a special throttle system. There is no cable, it's just an electric wire, no mechanical linkage at all on that. They have a semi-automatic gearbox, but they do not have the active suspension system, which is proving so effective for Williams. Will McLaren be back at the front? We'll have to wait and see.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Indeed, we will in just a few moments. There you see the front of the grid, Nigel Mansell waiting to go out. Now, a little earlier, David mentioned that there was an altercation between Senna and Mansell. It happened during Saturday's qualifying. Coming into the Bico de Pato, Mansell tried to get by Senna on the outside. The result, pushed Nigel into the wall pretty hard. Now, Nigel said it was not Senna's fault, just a miscommunication. Senna called it a dumb mistake by Mansell. Either way, it sent Mansell to the track hospital. But fortunately, like Senna in Mexico, he was only bruised, and he has been okayed to race today. Fortunately, nothing serious there. Now, we've talked about the fact that the contenders are up there. In just a moment, we're going to be back to give you the starting grid here for the Brazilian Grand Prix. This is round 3 of the Formula One World Championship. And this race is brought to you by Acura Automobiles. Experience precision-crafted performance. And by Suzuki. Your Suzuki dealer has the ride you've been waiting for and the financing to get it. Just a few moments away from the start of the Brazilian Grand Prix here at the Autodromo Jose Carlos Pachi. There you see the grid as it's formed with Nigel Mansell with the lead and Riccardo Patrese. Let's talk about the grid. As we said, Nigel Mansell qualified on the pole. This is the 20th time he's done it in his career, tied him for 6th on the all-time list. He's starting the car. He crashed yesterday. It was repaired overnight by the mechanics. Beside him is Williams teammate Riccardo Patrese. He was 2 seconds off the pace Friday, gained a second yesterday. Obviously, he's hoping to make something up. Beside them, in the next row, Ayrton Senna. He qualified 3rd, but as David mentioned, he was 9th in the warm-up. Not quite as fast as they'd want to be. Beside him, Gerhard Berger. He is starting the spare McLaren because he had problems during the warm-up session. Let's take a look at the rest of the grid. Michael Schumacher in the Benetton is starting on the inside of row 3. Beside him, Jean Alesi in the Ferrari, doing better than they have for some time in this series. Martin Brundle in the other Benetton coming up there. Pierluigi Martini in a Dallara. Carl Wendlinger and Terry Boutsen will make up row 5 here at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Ivan Capelli in the other Ferrari. Stefano Modena very happy that the car he's driving this weekend is finally going well. Row 7, Andrea De Cesaris, Michele Alboreto in the footwork car. Row 8, Eric Comas, J.J. Leto. Olivier Grouillard in the Tyrrell, and then beside him is Bertrand Gachot. Oh, we've got a problem. Let's take a look at the rest of the grid as we go. But this is Gerhard Berger sitting on the grid. The rest of the cars have moved out. He apparently cannot get the car started. Now, if they don't get to start in a moment, they're going to have to push it off, and he's going to have to start from the pit row, which is going to cost him a lap right off the bat. Obviously, you see them working on it, trying to figure out what's wrong with the car. Before they do that, though, we're going to have to find out what else is going on with the grid. Andrew Marriott has a story of who didn't make it.
Yes, Rick, and 6 drivers coming here to Brazil and failing to make the show. Well, very sadly, Andrea Chiesa of Switzerland put up a good performance in practice, but was actually bumped off the grid in the last 5 minutes by Johnny Herbert. Then we had Paul Belmondo of France. Well, he never really looked as if he was going to get in at all. And then the 2 Brabhams, that team really down in the dumps. Eric van der Poel of Belgium and Miss Giovanni Amati, they never looked as if they were going to get in the race at all. And we're here in the Andrea Moda pit. Well, some controversy here. Perry McCarthy did not get his super license in the end, so he didn't even try pre-qualifying. And then returnee Roberto Moreno, he failed to make it through pre-qualifying. These cars just too new. But let's see what happens to the 26 who actually made the show.
Find out in just a moment. But first, let's take a look at how the race sits for today. It is normally hot and humid down here. This is actually relatively cool, only 83 degrees. Partly cloudy, although it rained earlier in the week. There's a 20% chance of rain. Track itself about 2.687 miles, 71 laps as they go through this event today. 190 miles, the official distance. Now let's look at how the points come out. If you win the race today, you'll come away with 10 points, 6 points for second. It works its way down to the point where you get 1 point for sixth place. As for the current standings, well, it's Nigel Mansell all the way. He's got 20 points for winning both races. Riccardo Patrese second. Senna, that's the story, though, sitting down in fifth spot. He only has 4 points so far. Now they're getting ready for the start. There you see the red light come on, and it's green here at the Brazilian Grand Prix.
There one of the Benettons slips into that vacant spot that Gerhard Berger's left. Gerhard's going to have to start from the pit lane. We don't know what's ready for him, but great fisheye lens down there at the turn, the Senna S's.
That was a great move by Schumacher getting in there, but then it looked like Senna's passed him right back. Yes, indeed. It looks like you've got... Now, that's Riccardo Patrese in front. That's not Mansell. Mansell moves out, tries to make the pass, but can't do it, apparently.
Patrese nearly had them both off there.
I thought Mansell was supposed to be the #1 driver here.
Didn't make quite such a good start as Patrese, but had a go down there. That was that second fast left-hander I was talking about earlier on, but Patrese held him off and is now rushing off into the lead himself.
You just assumed that it was going to be Mansell who was going to take off into the lead. The way you can tell the two cars apart, Patrese is #6, but he's got a white #6 on the front of his car. Mansell, who is right behind him, is #5, and his is a red #5. Let's take another look at the start.
And that's Mansell on the right-hand side of the picture. So he made a beautiful start. Schumacher there in third spot, slipped into the vacated spot that Gerhard Berger left. Down into turn one, you can see a lot of cement dust there from previous oil, and everybody files it. That looks like the two Ferraris side by side there. It's in fact Alesi.
Look how close that Senna and Schumacher get right there. Senna makes no bones about it. He wants that place, and it's a game of chicken, and it's a game that Senna comes away the winner.
Senna, when he wants to get a place, he's a pretty tough guy to push aside, but he just absolutely forced the McLaren into the picture there.
And there you see Martin Brundle as he goes through the turn just a little sideways. Some wonderful pictures here from Brazil as you get the cameras down to a very low angle. Here the field, you see it as it comes by. You've got Patrese and Mansell, followed by Ayrton Senna. Then it looks like Michael Schumacher, Jean Alesi, and Martin Brundle right behind. And this is a great start for the Ferraris, considering how their season has gone so far.
Well, we saw Capelli there in those shots just a few moments ago. He was involved in that start line shunt in Mexico just 2 weeks ago, so he didn't even turn a wheel in the race. Having a very depressing season so far, hoping for better things today, but the car's still not doing well enough for them. New car, new engine, but just doing no much better than the McLarens, really.
And there's Gerhard Berger, who started from the pit lane, then moved out onto the track and is now trying to catch up with the rest of the pack.
Don't know what the trouble was, but I noticed they were fiddling with the steering wheel, and obviously at the back of the steering wheel is their gear shift control, so maybe they had a problem getting it into gear on the grid.
And once again, they had a problem during the warm-up session. He was in his race car during the warm-up session, and just moments before the warm-up was over, he dashed in, got into his spare car, and went back out. He was going to start the spare car. In fact, he did. It just didn't start quite as quickly as he would have liked.
Great speed shot here from a camera hanging over the start-finish line. Down into turns 1 and 2 there. The two Williams pulling away now. Patrese does not seem to be holding Nigel Mansell up much at the moment. There's no doubt about it. They're both of them rocketing up into the distance.
Well, and I have to think that if Mansell's going to pass, I mean, he's not going to sit back and let Patrese stay out there too long.
Well, he certainly won't sit back and let Patrese hold him up. But Patrese doesn't seem to be holding him up at the moment. And both of them are really legging it. Oh, there's Stefano Modena.
And in fact, you know, all weekend he'd been talking about how happy he was that the team finally had it on track, that the Jordan was driving the way they wanted it, and now he's out of the race.
They've had problems with overheating all year with the V12. They did all their testing in England and Europe through the winter, and of course, the very first race for South Africa, the thing overheated straight away, and everywhere they've been since has been hot, here included, and I don't know whether that's what's got them out this time, but Stefano ran very well on Friday. It was up to 8. Not as well as these guys, though.
And they're looking forward to going back to Spain, where hopefully it'll be just a little bit cooler.
Look at that gap already. Just, what, 3 laps into this race? And Senna's already nearly 4 seconds behind. Schumacher right behind him. Schumacher's going to be one tough runner. Just had an outstanding career today.
The McLarens are hoping, they realize at this race that they can't outrun the Williams. They're hoping for reliability, but considering they're running the new MP4/7, reliability is going to be suspect, the first race out for this thing.
Well, they've also got a new Honda engine, and they blew up 3 of those over the weekend so far. So even that, which has normally been a very, very bulletproof part of the Honda McLaren package, even the engine's looking a bit suspect, also new as well. The engineers have said it's no problem, they know what it was, and long term they're not worried about it, but it still has to be a worry for this afternoon.
There once again, Riccardo Patrese, who jumped out at the lead here at the Brazilian Grand Prix, followed by his teammate Nigel Mansell. And you're right, David, it just doesn't look like Mansell can get within striking distance.
No, and of course the other thing is both of these guys, one thinks, will be conserving their tyres. It's almost certain that this afternoon we're going to have a pit stop. We've got the C tyres, the C compound tyres on these cars. Goodyear and all the teams are figuring on making a stop, but if you run the car too hard too soon when it's full of fuel and at its heaviest, you can certainly run either the fronts or one of the rears off the car and have to make an extra stop, which would be a disaster. So I'm sure that everybody's driving within their capabilities here and the capabilities of their tyres.
On the other hand, there's really no advantage in staying behind Patrese. You're only risking trouble that can come from a car ahead of you.
Well, yeah, I mean, a piece could fly off the car, a bit of the track could fly up, or of course, he could just blow up in front of you or even spin off in front of you. So, yeah, you're right, it's best to lead.
Well, Martin Brundle had the problem in Mexico.
You see Riccardo Patrese set the fastest lap of the race so far at a 1:21. That's well over the lap record, but you'd expect that at the moment, cars full of fuel.
I was going to mention, Martin Brundle had the problem when a tear-off flew in and clogged up the radiator at Mexico, and that caused overheating just because he was behind another car. There you see Ayrton Senna being followed by Michael Schumacher. Schumacher staying within range, although once again it doesn't look like he's quite able to strike, although at this point of the track it's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah, a couple of right-handers here, which is very tricky to go through these and get the right place on the road. They're going to stop slowing down here for this slow right-hander. Then the track weaves around to the left, changing elevation all the time. As you can see, they're going down there, then they go up again. So the very slow right-hander down to second gear, maybe when they're full of fuel, even first. Then there's this downhill, pretty steeply downhill there. Well, you get a better view there of just how steeply downhill it is. Rush up to here in fifth, back to third, some of them back to second. Now is a long climb through this multiple left-hand complex of corners, back onto the pit straight. The camera shot will change in a minute and you'll see it. Oh, no, we won't. We'll see it from inside Mr. Senna. There we are, 293, 297 kilometers an hour. That's what, 185, and he's waving at something or somebody. That's just as he went past the pits. He had his hand in the air. Could have been making some sign into the turn 1 and 2. You can see how downhill that was there.
I find it hard to believe that he was motioning to Schumacher behind him. Oh, no, there's Gerhard Berger in the pits. Obviously, it was going to be a difficult day to start with, starting a lap down, but you could just see how dejected he is getting out of the car. His day and, well, this weekend has come to an end, unfortunately, for Gerhard Berger and the McLaren.
Well, having got out of so many racing cars myself, I know exactly how he feels.
Gerhard Berger, unfortunately, getting out of the car, although our own Andrew Marriott has chased him down the pit row and had a chance to talk to him.
Gerhard, very disappointing for you.
Yeah, not a very good weekend.
You had gearbox problems right from the beginning. Just talk us through it.
It's a shame because the gearbox was working very good in all the tests. And we had a problem now, but that's it.
And the MP47 needs a bit of work yet.
Needs work, yeah.
Thank you, Gerhard.
Needs work, I think, is going to rate as one of the understatement of the season. We'll be back with more from the Grand Prix of Brazil as Riccardo Patrese leads right after this. Richard Rule, David Hobbs, and Andrew Marriott back here at Sao Paulo for the Grand Prix of Brazil, and there is Ayrton Senna. Last year we saw him leading this race, but today it is far from it. He's back in third place and fading.
In fact, last year was one of the 19 races, a record number of races that Ayrton Senna has led from flag to flag. This year, so far, every race lap has been led by a Williams Renault.
And this is a sight you don't see very often right here. You've got Ayrton Senna ahead of a pack which is gaining on him.
Well, I was going to say is that whenever one's got a driver, a car's got a string of cars behind it, it's a pretty good bet the guy in front's holding him up.
Once again, Michael Schumacher doesn't look like he's quite in a position to make the attack just yet. But he's close enough there, as you see him go through the turns, that obviously he's got it on his mind. And if Senna doesn't do something pretty soon, they're going to be in a little bit of trouble. You know, ironically, they were saying earlier that Senna was saying that the only thing he likes off the new car is the transmission, which is brand new.
Yep, they've got new aerodynamics, although the car, as Andrew has already said, doesn't look much different, and it's got a lot of different suspensions, and ultimately, within 2 or 3 races...
And there you see him make a move on the outside, Senna underneath.
That would indicate to me that Senna must have either missed a gear there or it didn't go into the gear he thought it was, because he basically slowed up very suddenly. And
Schumacher got him going
rattled by, but Senna's right back again.
Ooh, this is a battle. Senna goes underneath. Schumacher doesn't get the place. There you see Alesi and Brundle right behind him, but we've definitely got a battle on our hands here in Brazil.
There you see a great low shot. So that's Senna, Schumacher, Alesi, Brundle. That's Pierluigi Martini and Carl Wendlinger in that blue, that turquoise blue car behind them. Wendlinger, who was involved in that start line crash with Capelli 2 weeks ago in Mexico, so he'll be very excited. Here's a replay.
Another look at the pass there. Once again, you see Schumacher go on the outside, take a moment before it comes in. You'll see him just in the corner there. At that point, he's already got it. It looks comfortably under control. And then you'll see Senna swing inside to a classic outbreak him into the corner and take the lead back.
Senna must have had a problem going up there, which would, the sort of problem it looks to me like he missed a gear, or it missed a gear. This is a pretty well totally computerized gearbox. One of the differences between their gearbox and the Williams is that on the upshift, the Williams, every time they flick the switch, it goes up a gear. These guys, as long as they're accelerating, when they flick it up on one gear, say third, and they flick it up, it goes through the box when the engine's ready for it to chase the next gear. So it almost turns into an automatic. And the same on the downshift. They flick it down once when they're in sixth, and as they brake and slow up, the gearbox picks up the next gear on the computer.
And they'd actually gone through about 3 different gearboxes. They were going in 3 different directions as they were designing their semi-automatic, hoping to come up with one that would really do the job, and this is the one they came up with. Cars cruising along. This is the pack once again that Senna is leading, and you just don't expect him to see at the head of this particular
Schumacher putting a wheel over the edge there, but look at that pack really packing in behind them.
You know, you were talking about the way those automatic transmissions work. Andrew Marriott had a chance to look at the way the Ferrari works.
Well, as you can see, I'm in the Ferrari pits, and not too many people hold one of these steering wheels. This is actually the steering wheel of Jean Alesi, and what we're going to show you is this special semi-automatic gear change. Now, you see my fingers here on what is effectively an electric switch, a rocker switch. Let's go up the gearbox. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then down again. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. The advantages? Well, the driver can actually keep his hands on the steering wheel. He doesn't have to put his hand down and change. And that really does make the changing quicker. Well, I'm having a lot of fun here. Off I go. 1, 2, 3, ow!
Back here for the Grand Prix of Brazil at the Interlagos circuit in Sao Paulo, Ricardo Patrese leading the race over his teammate Nigel Mansell. There you see the top 10 players in this game as we have them so far. And there is the man who is in a very interesting situation right now, Ayrton Senna, who is leading this long pack of cars, and you've got to think he's holding them up.
Well, it's hard to believe that he is, but I'm sure he's holding Schumacher up to a certain extent. Obviously, Schumacher is going very, very well, but to get around Senna is going to be another thing altogether. But it does tend to build him up behind him like that.
He's already made one pass and gotten passed back, and you have to wonder how much longer Schumacher is going to sit back there before he makes it. Again, it looks like he's making it now.
Yep.
And he just went by easily. Nothing like the last time.
I think Senna's got a problem either coming up the hill there.
There goes Alesi into 4th place.
Yeah, he's obviously got some sort of either engine problem or gearbox problem.
Obviously not running where he could, because Martin Brundle's right behind him, and you have to think that Martin's going to go by as well.
There's that very quick turn 3. Second fastest straight here, down to this quick left-hander, down into 3rd gear, maybe 2nd when they're full of fuel. See, that's quite a steep downhill. Then they start to go uphill again here, and Schumacher now scuttling off into the distance, trying to put a decent bit of ground between himself and Senna. Now, of course, hoping that Senna's going to be holding up the rest of that train of cars so that he can make a bit of a break.
Drastically different, though, than the last time he passed Senna, because now he's gotten by, and Senna's back behind 3 of the cars.
Brundle's got by Senna as well there.
Once again, when you think about the career that Senna's had with McLarens and how we used to sit back and complain because McLaren was dominating everything to such an incredible degree, and now to watch him fall back like this, it's almost painful.
Well, when we said we didn't want them to dominate, we didn't want somebody else to dominate. We wanted it to be a little bit more even.
Isn't that better, the devil you know, or something like that? We seem to have traded one evil for another.
I mean, there's a sight you wouldn't expect to see, a McLaren being hounded by a Dallara. Right behind him there, the red car, and right behind him, Carl Wendlinger in the unsponsored mark.
And here we see the pass again, just after the pass. That's after Schumacher had already gone by. There you see Alesi swinging out. He goes by. And just a few moments later, Martin Brundle will go by as well. And there you said it, the Dallara. There's Carl Wendlinger and the March, the Ilmor-powered car. The Dallara powered by Ferrari these days.
And, of course, the embarrassing thing about the Dallara in Mexico was it out-qualified and outran the Ferrari. And you know that the Ferrari engine they've got is at least 1 or 2 generations behind the ones that the factories themselves are using.
Ferrari, the factory Ferraris, had tremendous problems with the oil system in the first 2 races. And in fact, they tried a bunch of different techniques. They went home, tried several more, came back with a totally different system at this race, and they're hoping that they may have cured those problems. At least the car seems to be running relatively well. Back up front with the leaders, Riccardo Patrese. And you realize that this is the first race this season that Mansell has not led, and the first time that he has not led at the start of the race.
You're right. I hadn't thought of that. You're absolutely right. It's the first race lap he hasn't led, but it's still not the first lap that Williams, Renault have led every lap this year.
Ironically, it was after Brazil last year that Nigel Mansell still didn't have any points after 2 races. This year, he has 20. He's won both of them. But here in Brazil, it's Riccardo Patrese leading Nigel Mansell, the Grand Prix of Brazil. It is called the Interlagos, the Grand Prix of Brazil being held here at Sao Paulo, Brazil. Interlagos means between the lakes, and that is exactly what this circuit is, between 2 giant lakes. And right there is the man who is leading at the time, Riccardo Patrese. And there you see his teammate, Nigel Mansell, sitting a comfortable distance back, wiping his visor. Now, does that indicate that it's got some oil coming off, perhaps?
Well, it certainly would indicate something like that, unless he was trying to tear off one of his tear-off strips. And, of course, this is Riccardo Patrese's 226th Grand Prix. By far and away the highest number ever done.
Started back in 1977, and I imagine if you asked him back then if he'd still be running today, more importantly, running in a very competitive situation this late into his career, he'd be surprised. In other words, some comments that Mansell made over the weekend about the fact that Patrese just wasn't fast here. He got in the same car and went much, much quicker. He said you can expect to see Patrese going faster later in the season. Perhaps this is Patrese's answer. He jumps out and instantly leads this race.
Of course, it must be particularly satisfying to both these drivers that they are, in fact, the oldest and the next oldest drivers in Grand Prix racing at the moment. And surprisingly enough, Nigel Mansell is the one who is the oldest of the 2.
That.
He'll be 39 in August.
33 seconds back between Mansell back to Michael Schumacher and the Benetton. So these 2 are just running away with it.
Absolutely staggering lead so early in a race.
Once again, both the Riccardo Patrese and Nigel Mansell running away with the race here so far. Let's go down to Andrew Marriott.
Well, these Goodyear guys are having to work a bit harder this weekend because there will be pit stops here at the Brazilian Grand Prix. It's a very abrasive surface. Why are the pit stops so fast in Formula One? Remember, the cars only stop for about 8 seconds. 3 or 4 good reasons, really. Firstly, there's no pit wall for the guys to jump over. Secondly, no fuel is added in Formula One. They have to carry fuel to take them the whole distance. And then, of course, the final situation is that you can have as many people working on the car as you like. It's not like kart racing where it is restricted. As many guys can work on the car. That's why Formula One pit stops are so quick.
Each form of pit stop, though, has its own danger. Sometimes when I see the cars going at full speed up that Formula One pit with all those people, I get a little bit on the scared side. On the other hand, they don't have fuel, and at least the mechanics get to wear shorts.
Well, I think the whole thing is unbelievably scary because, oh, here we see Ayrton Senna coming into the pits. That's an early stop for tyres.
Wait a minute. He is out. That is the end of the day for Ayrton Senna. Berger out, now Senna out, no questions asked. Looks like the team was a little surprised as well. He just gets up, walks out, walks into the garage.
If ever I saw a cross back, that is it.
It is going to be ugly in the McLaren
team. Definitely an angry walk.
You know, you almost have to wonder if what they've gone through this weekend is actually going to set them back. You know, they rushed the car out, got it out this weekend before they planned. They hadn't planned on introducing it until Spain. Look at that. Out of the 4 cars out of the race so far, 2 of them are the McLarens.
Not a sight that one has become used to seeing over the last 6 seasons, but you're right. I think the Williams-Renault attack took them so by surprise that they have, in fact, rushed forward their own plans. And, of course, that is absolutely the kiss of death once you try and introduce things too soon on the racetrack. If they're not tested to their fullest extent, you just run into problems. On the other hand, if you don't bring them out and start racing them, you tend to end up never getting the thing onto the race. There's Gabriele Tarquini, about to be lapped there by Schumacher.
Schumacher, incidentally, this is going to be the last race for the 191 Benetton chassis. They have already got a new chassis that they're bringing out. There you see Jean Alesi. We talked about the Ferraris running so much better right now. They were having problems early in the season. Once again, talking about the fact this is the last race for the 191 chassis. In the next race in Spain, they're coming out with the 192, which should be even better, which has got to give McLaren even more reason for concern.
Well, it's certainly got to give McLaren concern. I'm not sure how much concern it's going to be to Williams. I just still can't believe that 8-cylinder engine is going to be a real match for the 10s and the 12s that Renault and Honda have. But it certainly, as an 8, is a spectacular piece of equipment. Revs to 13,500 RPM, has the pneumatic valve gear instead of springs to make it rev like that. Pretty impressive for an 8, but I'm not sure that it's going to have enough poop to really see off the 10s and 12s.
Well, next month, it just so happens that Ford begins testing its own V12, so they too realize that the wave of the future requires a few more cylinders, and they're getting ready. I would have expected Michael to get past the Fond Metal a little sooner than it has.
Well, of course, the Fond Metal's got an older Cosworth V8, and obviously has more horsepower. Schumacher will probably nail him at the end of the straight.
There you see him start to make a move.
Down the inside.
Easily slips past. There you see them going by right now. It's Michael Schumacher, Gabriele Tarquini right behind him. There's Jean Alesi. Ooh, and there you see Martin Brundle.
Martin
Brundle has a habit of slipping as he goes through there. I've noticed it on a number of occasions. As he goes through there, he gets just a little sliding, shall we say.
Yeah, it is. Although it's an abrasive surface here, the temperature's up, and it is just a little bit slick this afternoon.
It's interesting watching the noses of all the cars. There you see the Benetton, which is a totally different idea as to how to approach it. Here at the Formula One race, the 3rd round of the championship this year here at Brazil, Riccardo Patrese continues to lead with Nigel Mansell right behind. We'll be back with more right after this. Back here at Brazil, Rick de Bruyne, David Hobbs, Andrew Marriott watching as Riccardo Patrese and Nigel Mansell continue to simply run away. There you see they're ahead of one of the LaRousse cars. Having gotten by him, they're quickly working their way up through the back of the pack and lapping all the cars that aren't quite up to competition level today.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of the cars at the back of the grid, like everybody in IndyCar racing and not to be left out, are suffering from the effects of the recession, and there just isn't the money to go around, and any money that is gets pumped generally into the lead cars. So the Williams pick up sponsorship, the McLaren pick up sponsorship, the Benettons, and the other cars gradually tend to lose it, and life just becomes much more difficult for them.
There you see the leaders, Riccardo Patrese and Nigel Mansell, talking with Patrese over the weekend, trying to figure out what's the thing that gives the Williams such a great advantage. And his whole point all along is everything, every single part of that car, whether it's the reactive suspension, whether it's the transmission, it is all a part of the package, and it gives them that advantage. Here we see a rundown of the way the cars stand right now after 20 laps. We go through Ivan Capelli in the Ferrari back there in 10th place, Michele Alboreto, Eric Comas. See the cars as they go by.
Johnny Herbert's up to 14th. He had a terrible time in qualifying, and he just made the race. So he qualified 24th. He's up to 14th, so he's obviously having a better afternoon today
than he did
yesterday.
Christian Fittipaldi, who is making his home debut at the track where his uncle, Emerson Fittipaldi, won the very first Brazilian Grand Prix back in 1973.
In a Lotus.
Before he went on to much, much bigger things.
Racing, in fact, today out in Phoenix, Aries.
In the IndyCar series, as it is called today.
Here you see them at the Williams, Renault engine Williams. Now, of course, this is going to be a big thing. This race, the season is seen by, 2 billion TV viewers. And, of course, it's very, very important to the major sponsors. And 2 of the major sponsors in this racing are Honda and, of course, Renault. And with the opening up of the European community to Japanese products, it's very important for Honda to look good in Europe at the moment, and it's also very important for Renault. A huge concern, one of France's biggest employers, and so it's very important for them to do well, and they're certainly striking while the iron's hot. 1992 was the year of the new Open Europe, and it couldn't be happening at a better time for Renault to be looking so good on the worldwide TV.
Now there it looked like Mansell took a little look to the inside as if he's getting ready to make the pass, but he obviously wasn't ready to completely. He just took that little look and then moved back out. And once again, the gap seems to remain the same just throughout the laps.
I think that Nigel, if he sees an opportunity, he'll take it until it really comes up, because this is the thing, you see, we've got some tyre stops coming. Obviously, Benetton are very much on the ready for their tyre stop. It may be that Nigel's just not going to bother until at least after the tyre stops and try and sort it out in the latter stages of the race.
You're the team manager. Who do you bring in first, Patrese or Mansell?
I don't know. I'm not the team manager.
Well, I was giving you the honorary title for the moment. There, he's all over the rear end of Patrese. Now, see, I'd have to think that Mansell would want to come in first. Make that pit stop, get back out, do it his way, and get some clear air. Now we see Michael Schumacher coming into the pits. They're going to put on the tires, as Andrew was saying. This is much, much quicker than in karts. See how many guys they've got? They've got 2 to 3 guys on each wheel. They got 1 guy in the front, 1 guy in the rear. They have a whole horde of people out there, and they get them out in 7.5 seconds.
Not only do they have a whole horde, but of course everybody else has their whole hordes, and by the time they accelerate down the pit lane, these cars accelerate from 0 to 100 in about 2.5 to 3 seconds. By the time they get to the end of the pit lane, they're doing 130 miles an hour, and all those people are just standing there with no pit wall or rail between them. The whole thing, to me, just is pretty ghastly.
You're just thankful you're not It looks like LaRousse of Bertrand Gachot, who is out of the race. The car is rolled to a stop. Doesn't look like it actually spun off. It sort of rolled off.
Yep.
Well, that's unfortunate for the LaRousse team. Once again, back up front with the leaders, Riccardo Patrese and Nigel Mansell. There you see Mansell, once again, he's able to close up that distance. So you have to think to a certain degree that if he can get by, he might be able to just stretch away. But for the time being, he's got to be able to get by. And you also have to think that at a certain point, there's going to come the instruction for Riccardo Patrese, move over.
Well, I mean, the thing is that I don't think either of these guys are going to take any risks for themselves. On the other hand, just a few moments ago, we saw they had a 33-second lead over the Schumacher car, which is in third. So there's no great urgency to rush off and hide at this stage, because exactly what they're doing is rushing off and hiding. I think that, mind you, if Mansell got round here, we see John Alesi in the Ferrari. Is that right? Yeah.
Whipping in for his pit stop.
Engine there revving.
6.3 seconds.
Whoa! Carl Wendlinger, I think that was going down. That's what I mean.
How wide is a pit lane? Well, we just discovered it's wide enough for 2 cars and a horde of mechanics.
Jeepers, that looked very hairy.
Going back to Nigel Mansell, I have to think, once again, I have to think if I were Nigel, get the tires ready. I'm going to come in, make my stop, get back out there. Not only would I break away from Patrese's wake, but I'll have fresh tires before he does and can get back out and start moving just a little quicker.
That way he may be able to open up a bit of a gap, that's true. I'm sure that if he got around Riccardo, he would, there's one of the Lotuses, I think that's Mika Hakkinen.
Lotus having actually a relatively good season, although this weekend has not gone quite the way they would have liked. The first couple of races, I thought they were doing exceptionally well.
Now, they've got a new car coming along, too, in a few weeks' time.
There you see Riccardo Patrese. Speaking of pit stops, let's go down to Andrew Marriott. A few facts about how they keep those tires warm.
Come into a Grand Prix paddock for the first time, one thing you'll notice immediately is all the line of generators making that fearful noise, just droning on and on. But these generators are very important. Each generator is providing power to the heated tyre warmers. Now you see the tyre warmers there, they're heating up the tyres for the race, bringing them up to the right temperature. So these generators, they are noisy, makes our job very difficult, but they're very, very important.
Back here for the Brazilian Grand Prix, Riccardo Patrese, Nigel Mansell, Jean Alesi, Martin Brundle, Michael Schumacher. 24 laps completed of 71 here at the Interlagos circuit. Sits right in the middle of the city of Sao Paulo. And there we have the second Benetton of Martin Brundle coming in. We talk about those tire warmers. They've been at work. They just pulled them off moments before the car comes in. Put the tires on, send them back out in about 7.25 seconds.
They are staggeringly quick, those stops. They really are, but what a way to achieve it. There's the blue flag being waved frantically by a Brazilian marshal just off the edge of the picture there. You can see him waving there on the start-finish line as the Williams thread their way. There's Mika Hakkinen in the Lotus, about to be gobbled up by Riccardo Patrese in the Williams.
And this is where you have to think that something can go wrong. When you start going through the back markers, you have to worry. Now, this is a location that Nigel Mansell could take advantage of something and take the lead if, by chance, Patrese gets balked by one of the drivers. You see a Minardi just ahead of him.
See the Lotus, in fact, cut down in front of Nigel there, going into that left-hander. Obviously hasn't seen him coming up as well. And Nigel sweeps by there.
He made his point, I'd say, as he went by. You know, Patrese's got the advantage. He's the first car to come back up behind him, and if they don't notice this second Williams, because it's so close behind him, they can cause some problems. There you see he had to swing out.
It can be very tricky for a driver, because obviously it's all relative. I mean, the Lotus is only going a couple of seconds a lap slower than the Williams, so they're still going jolly fast, and they need to be looking out the front. They can't spend the entire time looking in the mirror.
Well, inevitably, they're in their own battle for their own positions, and last thing they expect is somebody coming blowing up behind them. And there you see Mansell has to cut a little tight as he's going through that turn to avoid hitting. And there's the second Ferrari. This is Ivan Capelli coming in. Capelli having a much better outing than he's had of late.
Oh, tremendously quick. Just a little bit on the slow side getting off. Otherwise, he'd have been under 6 seconds out again.
Now, the question is, are they going to be able to get by with just one pit stop today or two? Because these are relatively early pit stops.
They are, but of course, the real rough... The tyres have taken the roughest part of the race. The first few laps when the car's the heaviest. From now on, the wear will gradually drop. There's Maurizio Gugelmin in the one remaining Jordan. Oh, that was Olivier Grouillard. He just has the most desperate reputation for doing that sort of thing. Just won't ever let the...
Ooh, and there you see Mansell moved up, had an
Nigel
opportunity.
really had Patrese there, did he? Patrese just had to lift off a little bit because of Grouillard.
And Grouillard definitely closed the door. There you see Mansell once again starting to look like he was going to go to the outside, but unfortunately that's exactly where Grouillard was. There Grouillard easily makes a slip back in behind him, so Mansell got lucky on that one.
Yeah, Grouillard finally saw them all coming and let them through.
He was definitely closing the door. He didn't have the foggiest idea they were back there behind them.
Well, he has a bit of a poor reputation for allowing the leaders to go through. Here we see the Williams guys ready for their two cars. Now then, we'll see, as team manager, you've elected to have Nigel stop first. We'll see just who does stop first.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have a wire to the Williams garage, so I don't think they listen to me. If I predict one, it will inevitably be the other. There you see one of the cars going in. I couldn't quite see what it was, but let's see which car went into the pits. There's Patrese still out on the track. My guess is it was Mansell who went into the pits. Indeed it was. Mansell comes in for his stop. There you see. They pull on the tires. There you see three guys on each corner. One guy to handle the wrench, one guy to handle the old tire, one guy to handle the new tires. Now, this is relatively slow compared to the other pit stop we've seen from other teams. 8.5 seconds.
And you can see Nigel getting sideways there. You can see all those mechanics just on his left there as he rockets down the pit lane. And you saw that little hydraulic jack they have at the front. Instead of having a lift jack that acts on a fulcrum, they stick it under the front of the car, press a lever, and it just lifts the car up. But it didn't pull out quite as quickly as some of the less esoteric jacks did, in fact, at some of the earlier stops.
Over the years, the Williams team has had problems with their pit stops, one problem after another. In the last year, they seem to have solved that. But remember, for a long time, they were having problems with wheel nuts. They'd unthread themselves. They couldn't get them threaded. They were just having they'd have a great race, and then they'd get into the pits, and something would go wrong. And when you're having a pit stop of 6.5, 7.5, 8.5 seconds, if something, even of the most minute nature, goes wrong, it messes you up to several degrees on the several seconds, quite a degree on the track.
Yeah, if you've got a pit stop of 15 seconds and you're a second off the pace, it's bad. If you've got a pit stop of 6 seconds and you're a second slower, it's a big chunk of time. There's Carl Wendlinger in that turquoise car. And here's Nigel with the red number 5 on the nose, going up those long left-handers, climbing up here. That incredibly powerful V10 Renault engine, revving to 14,000 RPM in race trim.
There you've got Nigel Mansell, who is out in second place. Riccardo Patrese now has to make his pit stop. The question is, how fast will it be, and will it give him an advantage at the Grand Prix of Brazil? Back to racing here at the Grand Prix of Brazil. Riccardo Patrese still has not made his pit stop. Continues out racing on the course. You have to think in a few moments he's got to go in, if only because he's losing an advantage. His tires are no longer as good as they were, and now Mansell has the advantage. He's probably gaining some time per lap.
Well, of course, that's what always happens when the teams when they change tyres. The new tyres, even if these they're not worn out, it's just that tyres definitely lose their edge as the race progresses. In fact, they lose their edge very quickly. So it's nice to be able to keep on putting new tyres on, which of course is exactly what they do in NASCAR racing and IndyCar racing. They just keep on putting new tyres on.
And now it's sort of that unknown. You know, you've got Patrese out there running. Oh, no. That is one of the... Which one of the Benettons is it? Looks like Martin Brundle. And you see his front wing flapping, and that's the Ferrari of Jean Alesi. Alesi starts to wiggle a little bit, but he's back out on the track. But it looks like Martin Brundle's day is coming in there. Patrese comes into the pits. Now time for his pit stop.
That hydraulic jack at the front there.
And let's see if it's going to be any faster than Mansell's. Mansell's was about 8.5 seconds, and this one goes even longer, 9.1 seconds. So if they were even on the track, if they'd been running the same lap times, Patrese's going to get out behind Mansell.
Now this pit exit doesn't look too hot to me either. They rush out there. There's no way they can see what's coming up behind them. They just blend into the traffic.
Now we have to go back in just a moment and find out what happened to Martin Brundle and Jean Alesi. It looked like Alesi was going to continue on, but I have serious doubts that Martin Brundle was able to continue. And in fact, there you see Martin Brundle walking away. What a frustrating year this has been for that man. You know, he had so much potential. The guy can go very, very fast, but he's been battling a teammate who is younger and quicker, and he just doesn't seem to have any luck at all.
I tell you, he's just having that absolute driver's nightmare of a season. He's got a driver in there with him, a new driver who is clearly just a little bit quicker, and the last thing that Brundle needs is all, and here we see a replay of it.
Hard to tell who did what to whom, as the case may be, but there's no question that they both got into it. Jean Alesi apparently continuing on the track, but Martin Brundle's day has come to an end, an unfortunate end.
Somewhat snappy replay there, of which we had no control of.
Brundle, who's had such a hard time this year, he had a clutch problem in South Africa after being tapped from behind. The car was backwards, and he popped the clutch to spin it around. As a result, he burned the clutch. Then in Mexico, he had an overheating problem because a tear-off got in there. So Brundle's season has not gone well. Andrew Merritt's caught up to him in the pits.
Martin going very well again, and yet another disappointment.
Yeah, that's for sure, Andrew. Car was handling really nicely, and I was driving nicely. Car was working particularly well on the second set of tyres. I reeled in Alesi and got alongside him, and he blocked me 4 times, and on the 5th time put me in the wall. You're not allowed to drive like that. That was stopped 2 years ago. If you have the line, you have the line. Sure, you got to make it difficult, but particularly here where it's a tunnel of concrete walls, you cannot just move over on somebody.
Going to talk to him about this afterwards, no doubt.
Yeah, I'll talk to the stewards. That's their jobs to talk to the drivers.
Martin, thanks very much. Your luck's got to turn soon.
And that was a look of frustration. I'm reminded of what the old saying, if he didn't have any bad luck, he'd have no luck at all.
Yeah, as I started to say before, I mean, he's just having one of those nightmare seasons where everything is going wrong, most of it totally out of his control. I mean, that tear-off that fell into his air intake last 2 weeks ago in Mexico and overheated the oil, I mean, just sort of thing that you wouldn't read about, as Denny Hulme would say. You tried to get in there like winning the lottery.
You couldn't write fiction that terrible. It's a Stephen King novel, The Tear-Off. Now, as we go back to racing, it looks like Nigel Mansell threading between, looks like the two Ligets out on the track. Nigel Mansell, who I believe is now in the lead. Yes, indeed, Mansell is now in the lead. Patrese is sitting in second place as a result of the pit stops and the change in the action. There you have the standings. We have him, Schumacher in third, Jean Alesi fourth, Ivan Capelli is fifth here at the Grand Prix of Brazil. Mauricio Gugelmin, who has come in for his pit stop while we were away at break, zooms back out. Mauricio Gugelmin, the heavyweight among the Grand Prix drivers right now. The Brazilian is the heaviest man out there. He weighs 178 pounds, and that's really not that heavy, or at least I like to think not.
No, it's although actually for a Formula One driver, that is about as heavy as you want to be, especially when you think that Giovanni Amati, not that she's in the race, is only about 155 pounds, which is the ideal weight.
Ukyo Katayama is, I think he's just a couple pounds heavier than the Giovanni, so all these guys seem to be lightweights. In fact, Patrese and Mansell are two of the heavier drivers as well. They're two of the older, two of the heavier, and right now they're leading this race.
There you see that fast downhill stretch up to fifth gear and about 150 miles an hour, probably back down to third to this left-hand sweep here. Both the Ligets there. And there is Riccardo Patrese. Here's on board with Nigel Mansell as he comes up onto that pit straight. That's Harkonnen in front of him in the Lotus. Pulls out and passes him very, very easily. Harkonnen has the latest V8 from Cosworth. There they go across that start-finish line with that great speed shot. Wendlinger hanging in there. Eric Comas in the Ligier. His teammate Terry Boutsen in the other Ligier.
And Riccardo Patrese right behind them. Now, when Nigel Mansell went by, he went by very quickly and very easily. We can only hope that Patrese will have the same luck as he tries to thread his way back up through the field. And there you see the cars as they thread around. There you can see the distance between. You just saw Mansell leave the picture, 3 cars in between them, and there is Patrese a few seconds back. But that few seconds with those cars between them could stretch out if Patrese can't get clear of those cars very easily.
That Lotus that's in there, by the way, is not Harkonnen. I think it's Johnny Herbert, not Harkonnen. Here we see Riccardo Patrese coming up onto Thierry Boutsen in the Ligier.
Actually, both the Ligiers having better weekends than they have had in some time, although they both say they're nowhere up where they need to be. They're just not getting enough downforce out of those cars.
Apparently, there had been some awful cock-up with their downforce computations, and when they put the car back in the wind tunnel, they found that the downforce was nothing like what they thought they'd been getting. So if they find a bit more downforce, that's going to make a heck of a difference to the performance of the car, to say the least.
The best laid plans of Mice and Men. Now, they're also running the Renault engine, but very different than the one that is in the Williams cars. Trying to see who that was that leaped out the pass. That was indeed Mansell is going past. That looks like
Alboreto in the footwork car. It's nice to see that car still running strongly at this stage of the game. He's down in about 9th spot at the moment. Not too bad at all for them. Of course, they've got the first generation V10 Honda engines this year, so probably the best engines they've had. They tried the new Porsche last year, and it was an absolute disaster. Cost Porsche about $20 million, and it cost the owner of Footwork about the same amount of money as well.
What an up and down emotional roller coaster ride that team had. It went from being Arrows to being Footwork. And just when they seemed to be on the brink of coming back with that Porsche contract, suddenly they discovered the Porsche engine was nothing but a giant problem. They've gone up and down. One race they wouldn't qualify at all. Now they're here and they seem to continue on. Every now and then you hear rumors that they're not going to be back, but they continue on. And then you see the Lotus, which is painted much differently this year than it was last year.
Lotus, again, like I said earlier, as having a new car. 2 or 3 races down the road. They'll probably have active suspension a la Williams because, of course, they were one of the first teams to run a successful active car.
Doing a very good job of gaining sponsors as well. They seem to have, they don't have any real big sponsors, but they got a lot of little sponsors. And the key is in this race is simply surviving in this series, and a lot of little sponsors will do the job. Here at the Grand Prix of Brazil, Nigel Mansell continues to lead. We'll be back after this. You know, Monday is opening day for my second favorite sport, Major League Baseball, Toronto versus Detroit. We've got a triple header here on ESPN. As I said, Toronto versus Detroit at 1 o'clock, San Francisco versus Los Angeles at 4, and then at night, the New York Mets versus the St. Louis Cardinals. That's all coming up on ESPN on Monday. But right now, we are watching the Grand Prix of Brazil, and it is a race where the Williams are simply dominating. Not that we didn't expect them to, but I don't know. I guess after 2 races, I expect something to change eventually, and there's no change in the picture here from the last 2.
Well, it must be pretty depressing for the rest of the teams here. Of course, especially McLaren, who have got so much at stake. Obviously, they have the largest budget of any of the teams here. I guess that Williams Renault would be second.
Let's take a look at the race recap, the Suzuki race recap. Nigel Mansell is the leader. He's really only led 4 of the 35 laps. Up until that point, it was Riccardo Patrese. The fastest lap turned just a few moments ago by Riccardo Patrese, and that broke the old record that had been held by Gerhard Berger. He set it back in 1990, so that lap record had held for a couple of years.
The pace of development in these Formula One cars is absolutely staggering. Nigel Mansell's pole time of yesterday afternoon was nearly 2 seconds quicker than pole last year, and of course last year they had qualifying tires.
Oh my goodness, the 2 Ligers, that's Terry Boutsen, apparently was going up on the inside. He comes up and hits Eric Comas, and unfortunately Johnny Herbert, who was simply moving over to let him go by, gets caught up in it all, and he is off the track. And there, it's hard to tell which one that is.
That's Thierry Boutsen.
Oh, my goodness.
That's Thierry Boutsen's car. He was coming up to overtake his teammate, Eric Comas. Here we see it again. And poor old Herbert's in front of them. Looks like they're all trying to overtake each other there. Ooh.
It just looked like Comas never saw him coming. And there, I just don't think Johnny Herbert had any place to go.
No, there was absolutely nowhere left for him to go.
He didn't hit him that hard, but when you go off into the sand traps, you're doomed. There you see Johnny Herbert walking back. You know, when he first debuted with Benetton, which was his first race here in Brazil a couple years ago, he had such a great finish, and it seemed he had so much promise.
I think Johnny Herbert, if that new Lotus is anything like when it comes out in a few weeks' time, I think that Herbert's going to be, he's right in there. He's just a tick off the pace. But I think it's mainly his car, and I think that Herbert himself has got a lot of future in him.
There you see one of the Williams cars. That's Riccardo Patrese getting by the footwork car. You know, it's interesting to think about. You realize the footwork car right now is the only Honda on the track?
Well, it's the only Honda on the track. And, of course, Michele Alboreto was one of the few people that on Friday morning had to pre-qualify because one of the footworks has to pre-qualify. And the chore fell to Michele on the Friday, so he had to be up at 5 o'clock to be on the track at 8, and he got through the pre-qualifying, and here he is running in 6th spot now. So at the moment, he's set to get a point. No doubt got every finger and every bone in his body crossed to get to the start-finish line and get that point, because really, they have really had a very, very sad couple of years.
I was going to say, I could picture all the team in the back, you know, doing everything they can, hoping and praying that they can continue on in this position. Because once again, this is an excellent run for them. You just have to hope that as we go through the rest of the race that they'll be able to hold this up. There you see Riccardo Patrese continuing on in 2nd place. And looks like there's quite a gap now, about, looks like 19 seconds between 1st place and 2nd place. But once again, it is still a Williams 1-2 here at the Grand Prix of Brazil, with Schumacher, Alesi, Capelli coming behind after 38 laps. If you're just joining us, we're back here at the Grand Prix of Brazil, and it is the same pictures that you've seen, unfortunately, for the last 2 races. It's Nigel Mansell dominating the race right now. He hasn't led the entire way. His teammate, Riccardo Patrese, jumped out, took the lead in the beginning, and although Mansell tried a couple of times, he was not able to pass him. But now, after pit stops, he's definitely been able to get a hold of him. Now, during the break, our Andrew Marriott was able to catch up with Terry Boutsen, who was involved in that altercation, shall we say, with his teammate, Eric Comas.
I think there was a bit of a misunderstanding between 3 drivers. I was overtaking Eric, and Eric was overtaking Johnny Herbert. And at the start of braking area, I had plenty of room to pass everybody because my car was quite good there, and I was braking very late, no problem. But the gap became smaller and smaller as Eric was turning left. And I found myself trapped between the wall and his car, and I had to touch the wall to avoid him.
But you've actually made a lot of progress this weekend.
Sure, yes, I'm very happy about the progress we made. The car still has a big balance problem. It's very nervous, very difficult to drive, but it's got more downforce now, and it's a proper racing car now. So we're fighting to be back on the right road, and I think we've reached the beginning of it.
Terrific. Thank you, Thierry.
Thanks a lot.
Well, Boutsen was knocked out of the race. Comas was able to continue and is still out on the track. There's Nigel Mansell, also out on the track and running away from the rest of the field at this point in time.
Yes, and of course you'll see that he was just, before we went to that interview, was about to pass Jean Alesi, who's now following down the road. And of course Jean Alesi is running in 4th spot, which means of course that Mansell has lapped everybody up to 4th spot, which is even more shattering. There you see the gap between himself and Patrese now up to 8.3 seconds. Not staggeringly big, but when you consider that they both lapped everybody down to 4th, pretty telling for the rest of the field here.
There you see a recap of the positions after 40 laps. Eric Comas, as I said, is continuing out there. He's in 7th place. Christian Fittipaldi continuing out there. He's in 12th. And Johnny Herbert now out of the race. There you saw him in 15th position. Terry Boutsen, Mauricio Gugelmin, Gabriele Tarquini. These are drivers who are out of the race, along with Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger. If you just joined us and you're looking for a McLaren, you'll have to look in the garages because they are not on the track.
I'm afraid you will, and I would like to see a replay of the Comas-Boutsen incident, because I don't remember Boutsen tagging the wall first. I seem to think he ran to the back of his teammate, actually, but in the heat of the moment, it's hard to remember exactly what happened.
There's always a difference of opinion about how those things begin and how they end. And unfortunately, it's like the little battle between Martin Brundle and Jean Alesi. I have a feeling Alesi's going to tell a different story, but at the same time, obviously, someone was in the wrong and someone was in the right, although, as they say, it's a racing incident.
Well, some of these racing incidents, it's pretty hard to put your finger on anybody, really. I mean, everybody gets caught up in the heat of the moment, and you see an opportunity, you go for it, and the other guy's not quite ready to let you have it. And it's really is 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and these things just happen. Simple as that, really.
And you have to think at this point, only a racing incident or a mechanical failure is going to put off Nigel Mansell and put any dent in his chances. Just think, if he wins this, he'll have 30 Grand Prix points for this season, compared to Ayrton Senna's 4.
Yes, which would be a substantial change from this time last year, when it was just about almost exactly the same the other way around, wasn't it? I mean,
Mansell didn't even score any points in the first couple of races.
No, that's right. He didn't.
On the other hand, if you remember that Senna went on to win the first 4 races, had a 40-point margin, and there you see Frank Williams sitting in his garage watching it. They can actually sit and watch it on television, watch the entire event go by, and he has to be happy with what he sees today.
They have everything in there. They have the TV picture, and of course they have the scoring too, so they know exactly where they are and where everybody else is. And plus, of course, they have their own telemetry in there, which tells them how much fuel, and that is Eric Comas pulling up in front of the pit wall. Now, that's going to be a bit tricky. What are the marshals and the stewards going to do now? Just pulled up and stopped right there on the pit straight. Bit inconvenient.
Oops, wrong side. You have to think it had to be a result of something having to do with the coming together between he and Boutsen.
Well, it could be. It could be just some other, but yeah.
Some kind of leftover as a result. The other thing I was going to talk about, because Frank Williams can sit in there and watch the entire race, and all the team owners can actually, you also know that the driver can't come back with any other stories. They've got all the telemetry, they see it happen. Driver can't come back and say, well, so-and-so did this to me. And if the story
Well, the worst thing is the telemetry. When you say, oh, I'm going through there flat, and I'm going through there flat, and I'm going absolutely flat out through there, and they say, well, what's this graph show that you're lifting off for? I mean, that's the really embarrassing bit.
It keeps the drivers very, very honest.
There's the yellow flags being waved to warn the drivers that the Comas car is pulled up against the pit wall. Not a very good place to stop here, although it is pretty wide just at that particular point in the pit straight. But walls down both sides, so it's not like you can go onto the grass to get away from it.
And if you come down that front straightaway in the heat of battle and it's wide, then you never know what's going to happen. Andrew Marriott is along pit row, and understand that he is caught up to Eric Comas. Maybe we can talk about the accident as well.
Eric, what happened with you and your teammate Thierry there?
I think it's happened nothing, but just it was not very serious to try to pass 2 cars at the same time. I just do my job, overtaking Herbert, and it was okay for me, and then he go to crash on Herbert, but I have nothing to do with that.
What is damaged on the car?
The gearbox.
Thank you very much.
So it's gearbox problems that put him out once again.
But the fact that Thierry Boutsen hit Herbert was nothing to do with him. Did you hear him say that? There's nothing to do with me. So that's the other side of the story.
Everybody's got a different
What a
viewpoint
bunch of pellets, I tell you.
Michael Schumacher out here in the Benetton Ford, and continuing run just like Mexico. He's in 3rd place right now, and he would have another podium finish.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's been in 3rd place all weekend. And you've got to remember, this is only his 9th race, and this is the first time he's ever seen this racetrack. It was on Friday morning. First time he's ever raced here. Ran 3rd all weekend, 3rd in the warm-up this morning, and here he's run 3rd basically all day. Very, very strong run. The kid's obviously tremendous. He's got, if he finishes, he's got 11 points already out of his 9 races. And when you compare that with someone like Mauricio Guzman, who's done 61 races and has only got 10 points so far, pretty astounding.
There you see Christian Fittipaldi, and this is an intriguing thing. They're going to try and put in some of the races this year. Christian Fittipaldi has a heart meter hooked up to him. During the race, it's sending it back, and we can actually see what his pulse rate is. That's 148.
That doesn't sound very high to me.
Well, to me, it sounds very high, actually. 148 when you figure the average pulse rate, resting pulse rate is about 100, or pardon me, resting pulse rate should be about 78, although I have to think any good athlete's going to have it down in the 50s and 60s. So 148, you have to think it's up there and pumping.
I'd say that you'll find that most racing drivers, their pulse rate is around about 160 in the race.
Well, in that case, he's rather relaxed and casual out there.
But he's also extremely young.
Must be. Doesn't know what to fear yet. Also, he's got a little bit of racing in his blood. This is the type of thing that's been passed on, and this system, you might say, is even set up for it. The Grand Prix of Brazil is where we're at. Nigel Mansell continues to lead with Riccardo Patrese following in 2nd place. Brule, David Hobbs, Andrew Marriott back here at the Grand Prix of Brazil at Sao Paulo. And it is an all-Williams show for the time being, and unless they falter, you have to think that they are going to cruise on to the end. And
well, there's something even more scary just came up then. just before we saw Nigel Mansell come up in the frame, young Schumacher whistled out of it. There is Schumacher, and there. So that means that Nigel Mansell is about to put Schumacher down, and Schumacher's third.
And there'll only be 2 cars in the lead lap,
lap,
and both of them will be William Renault's.
Good for Renault, good for Williams.
Now, the question is, how quickly is he going to be able to get by Schumacher?
Well, I don't imagine he's going to just slot by him like he's got by half the other people here, but...
At the same time, I mean, you don't want to take any chances this late in the race. I mean, yeah, you still got a ways to go. You've got 25 laps or so, but you want to get by cleanly. You want to do it because you've got plenty of race left, but you don't want to take any chances.
Boy, look how quick the car was around that left-hand sweep there.
Right up behind him, takes a look to the inside, decides, no, maybe I'll do it on the next lap.
Here we see what it looks like from Nigel's point of view. Just a little bit quicker up this hill, pulls up alongside him, but no, not going to let him through there either.
He's doing a lot of looking, but he doesn't seem to be buying anything just yet.
Well, he's not going to take a chance, as you've already said. I mean, it'd be absolutely crazy to take a chance this race, even if you followed him home. From now on, it's not going to be any great detriment to him. This is that downhill left-hand sweep. No, it isn't. This is coming up to the slowest corner here. This is where he had his incident yesterday with Senna. Tight line there, running the wheel right over the inside curve. This is that downhill left-hand sweep. Up to 5th.
And there, once again, notice the hands never come off the steering wheel. That's how they make all their gear changes. Michael Schumacher.
That's how they make up some of their time. There's no doubt about it. It works. I mean, it is a real time saver.
It just allows them to be that much smoother. It's not necessarily a case of gaining time in terms of making the car faster. It simply allows them to be smooth. There, he looks to the inside, goes to make his move. Michael Schumacher didn't give anything up,
well,
did he?
He didn't give anything, and I think Nigel just gave him a bit of just eased him out off to the edge of the road there. Thought he might put him on some dirt and dust and give Michael Schumacher something to think about.
And Schumacher got just a little squirrely coming out of that turn. He was definitely out of line.
He was on the dust and the rolled-up rubber that's been collecting there all afternoon. Nigel's head there looking a little bit wobbly. Looks like he's leaning it back on the headrest behind him on acceleration. Hard, you know, we just saw that Fittipaldi's heartbeat. I mean, that's nothing to do with fear. Here we see a replay of the pass. Now you watch as he goes around here. I'll swear see, look at that. He's way out from where he would normally expect to be.
But that's the way it's supposed to be done. You simply do it at the end of that straightaway, outbrake the guy and go underneath him, and he did it, but
just stayed out.
A little wider than he anticipated. And you have to remember, once again, Mansell did have the crash in qualifying yesterday you talked about where he went off in that one particular turn. And although he wasn't badly hurt, he was bruised. And you have to think that when you get bruised up on Saturday, even though he's got a relatively smooth run today, it's got to hurt.
It's possible that his neck is still just a little bit there. Is Mika Hakkinen in the Lotus about to be put down another lap. There you see the gap between Mansell and Patrese. And that is Gruyard in the Tyrrell with the Ilmor engine. Well and truly puked that one by the look of things. Smoke coming out of both exhaust pipes.
Olivier Gruyard, who was almost involved in an incident with the Williams a little bit earlier in the day. Looks like his day is going to be coming to an end. There you see Mansell ahead of Mika Hakkinen, the only Lotus back out on the track.
After Johnny Herbert's rather unfortunate demise.
Let's talk about this Formula One World Tour and what it takes. We talked to the drivers about the problems of traveling around the world.
Not difficult at all. It makes no difference. It's easy enough to jump on a jet and move around the world. We get used to it.
Well, it's quite hard because you have to travel a lot right in the beginning of the season, but now of course it's getting better and you're happy to get back to Europe. But I mean, that's the way it goes and you have to take it this way.
I think it's not bad because we start with a difficult race in the beginning of the year and we are fit for the rest of the season.
Well, it's not that difficult, except that when you keep traveling back and forth to the factory in between the races, then you're a little bit tired after a while like this, but otherwise, it's okay. It's a good start of the season. I like it.
It's perfect because I had a good holidays in San Diego between the races, so it was perfect.
Now, there's a race driver who has the system down. He knows how to vacation. You know, you're talking about the work that goes on between. That's a battle when you've got all the races, the first few races in the Americas, and you've got to run back. And that looks like, is that Gruyard coming into the pit now?
I guess so, yeah, I think so.
Once again, going back to what Terry Boutsen was saying, you're having to run back and do as much work on the car as they can, and then have to shuttle back and forth between the continents. That makes life very, very difficult. And that's something Nigel Mansell doesn't have to work quite about as much as he used to. He's now a resident of Florida, so his little trips home aren't quite as difficult as they were. 54 of 71 laps completed here at the Grand Prix of Brazil. And there you see it, the man who is leading the race here at the Grand Prix of Brazil, the third round of this series, and he looks like he's on his way to his third victory. Nigel Mansell in the Williams Renault, as he continues to dominate the second half of the race, although, as I said earlier, he had a bit of a battle in the first half of the race until the pit stops came along and he was able to get past Riccardo Patrese, but now he's stretched out to a very, very easy lead. There you see Riccardo Patrese.
And that just behind him is Gabriele Tarquini in the Fond Metal V8 Ford engine car. Hanging in there very well, actually, this afternoon, I'd say, is our Gabriele.
Doing a yeoman's job of competing here at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Riccardo Patrese, the only driver here who drove on the old configuration. You know, they ran the Interlagos circuit back in the late 70s. They stopped running it during the 1980s, and they only came back to it back in 89 after some extensive reconstruction work was done. Riccardo Patrese is the only driver who drove it in the old configuration because he started back in 77.
Now, the old configuration, now that was a real man circuit. If you could just see it from the blimp, if we had a blimp in, you could have a look down on it and you'd see where it went. That turn one, for instance, where they go sharply left and then they do a right and a left wiggle back. The old one had a slightly banked left-hand turn there that was about 175-mile-an-hour turn back then. Now, with the downforce that they've got and these cars generate, it'd be a 190-mile-an-hour corner. So obviously not acceptable at all.
Well, once again, they've made some changes. They've slowed the circuit down. They came back here in 1989. In the interim, they were racing at another circuit here. And I've never been able to pronounce the name of it. How do you pronounce it? The Nelson Piquet circuit?
Hacaparagua.
Hacaparagua. I can never pronounce the name.
As Chris Economaki said, I just got to pronounce Hacaparagua and they changed the circuit again.
Well, I like Interlagos. Much easier to say. Much easier to say. And there you see Jean Alesi having a wonderful run here. There you see the unique side pod system they've got set up. Part of the changes they made to this chassis. A lot of, shall we say, battles going on within the team right now, trying to figure out what to do and how to solve the problems they had in the first two races. But if this is any indication, who's that sitting off to the right there?
I think that was that the car of Carl Wendlinger, the blue car?
Oh,
and there's Christian Fittipaldi.
Oh, after such a great race he was having in there.
There you see, 167, that's more like it.
Now, why is his pulse rate up now that he's out of the race? Just because he's going to have to go back and explain what went wrong?
I think the machine's faulty.
Oh,
that's what it should be. That's about right. 160, 167 is about right for a race.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Even though he probably wasn't going to finish in the points, just to finish your first Grand Prix in front of the hometown crowd would have definitely been a great treat for Christian Fittipaldi, although his day has come to an end. There you see Nigel Mansell. We're on board with the leader of the Brazilian Grand Prix as he powers his way through the track. We have 14 laps to go. 14 voltas para e final. Is that how you pronounce it?
Sounds good to me.
I got to get my Portuguese down. Unfortunately, I'm not very good at it. Para. I'll get it down eventually.
There you see his transmitting aerial in front of him there, that little upright post there. Every time he goes past the pits, that sends out a millisecond blurt of information which fills the computers in the pits with everything that happened to that car and engine and transmission over the previous lap.
And I'm always intrigued. They designed such a sleek car and they stick this antenna right in the middle of the darn thing.
Well, you can aim with this. It's a nice aiming point.
That's right. I'm going to get that guy.
That's why they come out looking cross-eyed.
Nigel Mansell has about a 16.9-second lead over Riccardo Patrese. And from Patrese back to Schumacher, you got to remember that he's another lap down. So this is a walkaway at this point in time.
You could say that this is an absolute demonstration of vast superiority. And they have a new car coming about 2 races down the road. So I'm sure the rest of the team is extremely glad to hear about that.
In Woking, which is where McLaren International is based, they are going to be burning the midnight oil.
They're going to be burning a lot of midnight oil, and there's going to be a lot of testing and an incredible amount of money spent over the next month before the next round of the World Championship takes place in Barcelona, city of the 1992 Summer Olympics. And we shall be there on May the 5th. And that'll be coming to you live at a mere 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, only. That's for you on the East Coast. For those of us on the West Coast, it's about 5 o'clock in the morning.
Actually, I was slightly wrong there. It's actually 7:50 in the morning.
7:50, pardon me. You know, Nigel Mansell, talking about testing, Nigel Mansell immediately after this race is heading back to Europe to do some more testing as well. Damon Hill, who is their test driver for the Williams team, and Mansell have scheduled a few days of testing, and so they've got some work ahead of them trying to get ready for their new chassis.
Well, of course, all these teams have got 2 or 3 different teams, the same as the top IndyCar teams. They've got test teams as well.
You know, just a few moments ago, we were talking about the problems of moving the drivers around, but it's an even greater problem moving all the cars around from track to track.
Moving a Grand Prix team around the world is a major logistical operation. You see here all the specially built packing cases where all the spares are packed away. Inside these crates are engines, spare suspension parts, spare bodywork, all the team equipment, even computers in here. The fuel has to be shipped as well. Here you see the barrels of fuel. They're put on the aeroplane and then right back in the garage. There you see the car. That will have special slave wheels fitted to actually go on the aeroplane. Everything's packed away into a jumbo jet, many tons of equipment. And then when they get to the next race, everything's unpacked again. Of course, these cases have very detailed lists and the team knows where everything is. And that's it, moving a Grand Prix team around the world.
It was a Williams 1-2 at South Africa, a Williams 1-2 at Mexico, and right now it is a Williams 1-2 here at the Grand Prix of Brazil as they have led the entire way, and it appears that they're going to do it as well. There's Jean Alesi in the Ferrari. Actually, that looks like his teammate, Ivan Capelli.
Yeah. Ivan Capelli will be glad to finish this race where he is at the moment. He's in the points. He's running in 5th spot, just behind his teammate. Things aren't looking good for the team in general and have been looking particularly gloomy. As you can see, he's only completed 30 laps in the whole season so far. That's not quite right, but I mean...
every young Italian dreams of driving for Ferrari. He finally got the chance, and he picked the year when the team is having a bit of a problem.
This, of course, is that double-bottomed car. It has 2 skins along the bottom to try and use the air flowing under the car to absolute maximum effect, but it doesn't seem to be working as well as they had hoped. Their 1992 series engine has had oiling problems and just generally got off to an absolutely chronic start. But I suppose you could say that today going considerably better than the mighty McLaren Honda.
That's true. At least he's continuing on in the race. This was a car originally designed by Steve Nichols, and now Harvey Postlethwaite has come on board and is making a few changes, and there's some question as to whether you can make the changes on that type of car, and have had some teething problems as a result. After 60 laps, this is the rundown that we have right now. There we were just talking about the 2 Ferraris.
This is a race for position here, of course. Alboreto there behind him, an ex-Ferrari driver in the footwork Honda. And that is a race for 5th position.
Alboreto in the points at this point in time. Well, he'd come away with 1 point if the race were to finish right now. And you have to think that the team is... I think a little earlier we talked about how they were crossing their fingers and toes. I think they're starting to cross each other at this point in time.
I mean, the team would dearly love him to overtake Capelli and come 5th. But just right now, I'm sure they'd be extremely happy to settle for what they've got, which is 6th and 1 point. And, of course, that, if they can continue that and hold that point till the midway part of the season, it gets them out of that pre-qualifying mess again.
The last time the team scored a point was back in Monaco in 1990, and the last time Alboreto scored a point was back in 1989. That is Michael Schumacher, the only Benetton left in the race. Martin Brundle had a coming together with Jean Alesi. As a result, he was knocked out of the race. Now, this particular car is the only Benetton left. You know, at the beginning of the season, Michael Schumacher said, you know, all I want to do is try and finish races for a first full season, see if I can finish some races. Well, he's doing a little better than that. Looks like he's going to end up on the podium again. Down to the closing laps of the Grand Prix of Brazil, and this man, Nigel Mansell, is continuing to lead, just as he had throughout the second half of this race, throughout both of the first 2 races. You know, it's interesting. FOCA, the Formula One Constructors Association, held a meeting this week on Thursday to try and figure out ways and to decide if they need to make Formula One more entertaining. It's a word that they've always shunned in the past, and they're now actually talking about, well, what can we do to make it more appealing to television? And one of the things discussed was actually a full course yellow, a la NASCAR, to bunch up the pack, although so far there is not a lot of support for the idea.
The other thing was mandatory pit stops, because this, although we've had a pit stop this afternoon now, we've got to look over Nigel's shoulder as he goes around that very sharp right-hander. Downhill left-hand sweep. Although we've had a pit stop in this race, the first two races didn't have pit stops either, so it really was just stretching one's patience just a little bit to sit and watch the car lead all afternoon. Although, just a few hours ago in Phoenix, Aries, Bobby Rahal led the 200-mile race at Phoenix, and he also led from flag to flag, so it's certainly not just Formula One that has these sort of things. Even with a race like Phoenix, which had a lot of pit stops, a lot of tyre changes, refueling, still had the same driver led from flag to flag.
You know, we always look back to...
My old boss, Carl Hogan, of course, one of the co-owners of that car. I saw old Carl on the telly this afternoon. He used to hold his stomach in a bit more, I think.
Think he'll call you back and see if you need a little ride for Indy?
Yeah, fine.
Not likely this year, you know.
Not likely.
Not likely, not likely. There's Nigel Mansell continuing to lead here at the Grand Prix of Brazil. You know, he has moved to Florida, and one of the things he's talking about is that he likes living in Florida not only for the climate and a lot of other things, he likes the anonymity. You know, you have to face it, in the United States, Formula One is not as popular as it is, especially in his home country of England or even the Isle of Man where he was living. The result is he says he can go down to the shopping mall, he can go to Disney World, he can go to all these places and not have the horde of people around him. He says one or two fans maybe will recognize him and come up and ask him for an autograph or something. But in the grand scheme of things, he says when he goes to the supermarket, he's just another guy, and he actually loves it.
Of course, there aren't any supermarkets on the Isle of Man, apart from the fact it's the rain capital of the world, so you never go outside on the Isle of Man anyway.
One extreme to the other when you go from the Isle of Man to Florida.
Clearwater, Florida, yeah.
Florida.
Yeah, pretty staggering culture and climate change.
But the change of scenery has been pretty good for him. He came back into Formula One extremely fit, extremely healthy. He lost weight. He says he's feeling better than he ever has before. And if you think about the little shunt he had over the weekend on Saturday, he really needed to be healthy on this particular race. It's probably one of the few things that's helping him go through it as well as he has.
Well, I was going to say earlier on when we saw Christian Fittipoli's heartbeat, this is a sport that is just so much more physically demanding than people really realize. The endurance required to drive one of these cars, the G-force that's generated on your body, both lateral and, of course, 4.5. These things accelerate at about 2 Gs, they stop at 3.5, and they corner it up to 5. There's an awful lot of strain goes through the body, and that's what gets the old heart pumping. It's not the fear of imminent demise, it's just sheer physical effort.
It's the work, and that is what it is. It is a job, and this guy you see on the track right now is working very hard. There is Christian Fittipaldi, Mr. 148 pulse rate himself, walking back to the pits, someone carrying his helmet for him, waving at the fans, and they have to be sad to see a man I'm sure they hope is heir to the throne falling out so soon.
I imagine a lot of the fans have already left the park, because as you can see, if you've just joined us, although I hope you haven't just joined us at this time in the morning, Senna and Berger and the two McLarens are out a long time ago, and I'm sure that many thousands of people wended their way towards the gate when the local hero, Ayrton Senna, dropped out of this race very early on.
In fact, ticket prices were pretty steep for this particular race. It started at $76, went up to $160. Now, you combine the fact that the ticket prices were steep, the fact that the economy isn't doing so well in Brazil, and Senna was not dominating going into this race the way they expected, and actually the turnout, you can see some empty stands back there, really was not as good as they expected. You see some folks already walking out. They only had about 45 to 50,000 people out for this race today. And they really can take about 60,000. So as a result, they're down below where they would like to be. And you have to think, once again, with the Brazilians, all three Brazilians out of the race now, that a lot of them are working their way towards the exits.
6 voltas para o final.
I basically believe that means 6 laps to go here at the Brazilian Grand Prix.
And this will be the completion of Riccardo Patrese. I said 226 Grand Prix. In fact, it's 227. So Imola will be 228. Monte Carlo 2:29, so his 230th Grand Prix will be Canada in June.
And that's a record that is going to stand for some time.
I would say so.
No one else seems to be. And the only other driver who was second behind him is Andre de Cesaris.
That's Katayama in the Larousse, in the Venturi Larousse there, hanging right in there. He's got a 100% record this year.
Well, that's not too shabby.
He's an absolute rookie in Formula One.
There was a lot of criticism of him coming into the series, but he's done a very good job all year long. And once again, if you just continue to finish the races, eventually you're going to finish in the points.
He's running in 9th at the moment, so if there was to be a rapid decimation of the cars in front of him, he could get a point today. I don't think he will. There's two laps to go. But Katayama hanging in there in that Lamborghini engine Venturi Larousse.
And as we saw last year, anything can happen in the closing laps. As Mansell himself learned, you don't want to start waving at the crowd too soon. So even though we talk about it as if it was in the books, with the few laps remaining here in Brazil, anything can indeed happen. So they've got to be a little careful, and perhaps in the Williams pit they'll start crossing those fingers, picking up a few tips from the footwork team down the way. Nigel Mansell leading here at the Grand Prix of Brazil. Yukio Katayama behind him, although only on the track. He is back behind him in positions quite a few ways. I believe he said he was in 9th position, so he's back away.
2 laps down.
There you see Christian Fittipaldi holding court. You know, for a young man, 21 years old, he's doing a pretty good job both on the track and off the track. I'm sure he's learned a lot both from his uncle Emerson and from his father Wilson. We'll be back with more from the Grand Prix of Brazil right after this. Victor Brule, David Hobbs, Andrew Marriott here for the Grand Prix of Brazil. Nigel Mansell leads the race. Both McLarens have dropped out. Before the season started, Nigel Mansell made the comment that he thought McLaren had something up their sleeve. He kept hearing about all these problems, how things weren't quite right with the team, but he kept thinking they were hiding something. Well, unfortunately, he was wrong. They weren't hiding anything. They are simply in trouble. And trouble's a relative term. I mean, there's a lot of teams that would like to be able to go as fast or do as well as they could do. But at this point in time, and in this race in particular, McLaren is in trouble.
Well, I think that the Williams performance this year has taken people by surprise, and I'm not really quite sure why, because I think that last year it was the best car, and I think perhaps if Ayrton Senna had been driving a Williams last year, he would have still won the World Championship. They made some errors amongst the drivers, and of course they got off to a slightly rocky start with reliability. But they also made some mistakes which really didn't help their cause last year. But there's undoubtedly, towards the end of the year, the Williams Renault was clearly the best car last year. And they've just continued that same development into this year. And now they're absolutely cleaning everybody's clock off. And there's old Katayama there getting a bit sideways going through. I noticed him looking a bit squirrely just a couple of laps ago.
He's taking advantage of the exposure on international television.
Hanging in there well at the moment.
Yeah, actually very, very well.
The car's that difficult to drive. That's good, you know.
Soldier on to the finish. That's the rule at this point in time. You know, Brazil is the site really of one of Mansell's greatest victories. The very first race for Ferrari, when he was driving for Ferrari, came to this track. They were having all kinds of problems. The first season of the new transmission. He, in fact, had booked himself an early flight out that day because he didn't expect to be around at the finish. And as the race went on, some of the leaders fell out. And the next thing you knew, Nigel Mansell had himself a victory for his first Ferrari outing.
Well, that just shows how relaxed they are in the Williams pits. Crew member sitting down there, a sight that IndyCar people would have an absolute heart attack at, of course, is the mechanic there wearing shorts in the pit lane.
In IndyCar, you not only have to wear pants, but the mechanics have to wear fire suits because of the obvious fire danger from the fuel. But in Formula One racing, there is no concern over fuel. Therefore, not only do they not have to wear fire suits, but during the races where it's hot, they simply wear shorts. They look a lot more relaxed, a lot more casual, and they seem to enjoy it. Just 2 laps to go before the end of the Brazilian Grand Prix. Nigel Mansell continuing to lead his teammate Riccardo Patrese. They are the only 2 cars on the lead lap. Michael Schumacher is on the following lap. He's in 3rd place. Then it's the Ferraris. Then it's Michele Alboreto in the footwork Mugen Honda.
And those 3 cars are all on or those 4 cars are all on the same lap. Schumacher, the 2 Ferraris, and Michele Alboreto. So Michele Alboreto only 1 lap down, which must be very, very encouraging for the footwork people. I'm surprised that Suzuki's not going quicker this year. He didn't go very quickly in practice and qualifying, and he dropped out fairly early on, so maybe he had problems with his car. But this man here hasn't had any problems all day, not that we know of yet. I've no doubt that some will crop up in the post-race interviews, but it certainly appears to us to have had a trouble-free afternoon and has wound his way. The only passing he's had to do, he didn't actually do on the track. He did when Riccardo Patrese stopped in the pits, and has since put a big gap between himself and his teammate. The only two cars on the same lap.
You make
Pretty shattering display.
You make an interesting point, which is that it seems that all you hear from the drivers is about the problems they have. You know, after Mexico, Nigel Mansell was talking about, here we are on the final lap. You can see it right now. He says, yeah, we've got the active suspension, reactive suspension. He says, but it's no piece of cake. We're actually working harder. He showed the blisters on his hands, saying how hard he had to work. They seem to come in and talk about all the problems they had. There was a British writer in Autosport who was talking about the fact that that in the old days, he says, well, you know, Mario Andretti used to really enjoy the fact that he'd come in and say, everything's perfect. Everything in this car is wonderful. And that was the psych out to say, oh, it's so wonderful. Whereas these days, it seems to be the exact opposite. Well, you know, we could do a little better if the car would only run better. How can you run much better than this?
Well, I think they think that in some way this is going to engender sympathy from the crowd or the reading public, that it really isn't. There's a lot more difficult than it looks, and it's, you know, it's just so much codswallop, really.
What was that word?
Codswallop.
I'll have to write that one down. Nigel Mansell, whoa, that's a LaRousse coming right up on his tail.
That's all he wants now is Cathy Armand to take him off in the last lap.
Would not be the high point of his week.
It would.
There you see the fans off to the side, some of the corner workers starting to applaud. There's the team getting suitably excited here in Brazil. This is going to be win number 3 for the season. Not only win number 3, but 1-2 finish number 3 as they lean out over the pit wall as Nigel Mansell comes on to the front straightaway. And there, the checkered flag. Nigel Mansell has won and dominated the first 3 races of the season.
Not have they dominated the races, but they have dominated every single free practice and qualifying session since the beginning of the year back in South Africa, including the very first session on the Thursday, which they were allowed to have in South Africa. So this team has absolutely dominated. I don't think we've seen domination quite like this, even when McLaren were at their heyday.
Just think, you know, we're talking about the fact that McLaren used to dominate so much. At one point, you know, there was the talk about how the record of pole positions that McLaren had. If the Williams team continues on, if Mansell continues on the way he's doing this season, they could end up with a similar record and perhaps break the qualifying record, the number of poles. And looks like he stopped and picked up a flag. That's not just a British flag. There's a Brazilian flag as well. Somehow I don't think he had that stored in the cockpit. Here at the Grand Prix of Brazil, Nigel Mansell is the winner as he cruises on his victory lap. Well, this ESPN presentation of the Grand Prix of Brazil was brought to you by Slick 50, the engine wear protector. 1 quart, 1 time, because starting your engine is a terrible thing to do. And by Budweiser, the king of beers, with that clean, crisp, cold taste. Nothing beats a Bud. Well, let's take a look at how they actually finished today. Nigel Mansell, we know. Riccardo Patrese, Schumacher, once again third. Alain Prost. Now, that's interesting. I didn't realize he was in the race. Both the Ferraris, though, finishing 3rd and 4th. Michele Alboreto in 6th. Gianni Morbidelli, JT Leto, Ukio Katayama. There you go, in 9th place. Mika Hakkinen, the Lotus. Gabriele Tarquini, Carl Wendlinger. Christian Fittipaldi, unfortunately, not finishing this particular race, although he'll be classified as 13th. There you see 17th through 22nd, Terry Boutsen, who had the accident with his teammate. Martin Brundle, who had all the bad luck we talked about. Andrea De Cesaris, who I thought was going to do a little better. And there they are, the 2 McLarens, Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger, neither of them finishing this race. Now let's take a look at the driver point standings. Pretty obvious at this point. It's real easy to figure out. Nigel Mansell, 3 times 10 is 30. Riccardo Patrese, 3 times 6 is 18. Michael Schumacher sitting up there. Here's the constructor point standings. Williams Renault, a long, long way above the Benetton. And then it's McLaren, 48 points to 11 to 9. The next Grand Prix that we will be sending you will be from Barcelona, Spain on May 3rd. A Formula One race The Grand Prix of Spain starting at 7:50 a.m. Eastern Time. Well, Nigel Mansell looks like he's getting out there just a little on the slow side. That's a big step up there, but he's earned it. And there you see the flags that he drove around the track with. The fans who've come out to enjoy this particular, looks like some of the corner workers. There are the two teams. You've got the Williams team and the Benetton team. And what a trio they make, just like in Mexico. Well, that's it from the Grand Prix of Brazil. Glad you could join us for this particular edition. For David Hobbs and Andrew Marriott, I'm Rick DeBrule. Hope you'll join us in Barcelona. So long from Brazil.